Welcome to Spirit Journey Collective. I'm your host, Sarah Tai. Get ready for compelling conversations with guests of all walks of life who believe they have found their purpose. Together, we will uncover unique backstories, hearing the raw experiences that led them to the work they are doing today. Let's expand our minds together with the captivating stories and inspiration that awaits. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of Spirit Journey Collective. I have a really special guest today. Her name is Lori Lisai. She is a human design teacher, mentor, and alignment coach. And we're going to really dive into the human design aspect, which I cannot wait to learn more. So first of all, thank you so much for being here today, Lori.
Thank you so much, Sarah. So great to be here with you.
It's great to have you. So why don't we start with just sharing a little bit about yourself? I know I did a quick introduction, but why don't you just go in a little bit deeper as just who you are and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So, my name is Lori Lisai, and I do work with human design to help people basically, I like to say, shed other people's expectations and be who they came here to be. So, that is a lot of work around what we call deconditioning, right? It's like unlearning all of those habits and patterns that we've become steeped in throughout our lives and really getting back to the core essence of who we are. So I was a public school teacher for 26 years and I left that work in 2021 and I sort of didn't really have a plan. I just sort of leapt because it a number of things sort of came together to tell me that it was the right time. So I took that kind of scary step out and into an entrepreneurial journey that I've been on now for a few years. And human design has been a huge part of that. And I'm so eager to share it with people to help provide them with, the clarity, tools, and like specific language that they can use to, you know, come back to who they really are.
I love that. Yeah, and deconditioning is, I think it's more of a newer idea, right? Maybe, I don't know. I've only really heard it in the last few years myself, but I think that that's just a big mainstream idea of who are you underneath all the things that society told you to be? And society and with human design specifically, that's one of the things that I loved about it when I discovered it was it felt like for the first time I was being seen and I was able to like really be able to understand why I do and am the way that I am. And it fascinated me from the beginning in that aspect. So I love that you're teaching that and using this tool that's like almost like you can't deny it because when you pull up your chart and it's so resonant, it's like, okay, so how do we help you get back to that? To where you're supposed to be. So when it came to, your backstory, how you kind of took that leap of faith and everything, what were you already on the human design journey when that happened, or did you find human design after you left?
Yeah, I had started to learn about human design about a year and a half earlier. And just like you said, it was so incredibly resonant. And, I had always loved astrology. My grandfather was, very spiritual, had, tarot cards and all of the little, spiritual kind of interests. And he was always really fascinating, but I didn't know him that well. And I was very intrigued though, and throughout my entire life I've felt this pull toward astrology and all of those sort of esoteric kinds of things. And when I found human design, it just like it blew my mind because it's all of those systems combined. And it was the first time that I realized that somebody had kind of brought together so like all of these tools to become something new, in this synthesis. And like you said, it resonated with me and it helped me, I think, ultimately trust myself in that kind of decision. And I think without knowing what I learned through human design, I probably wouldn't have done it. I would have probably doubted myself or felt like this is crazy, I don't know what I'm doing, I don't have a plan, like how am I going to make money, all those questions that come up. And I think I was able to just trust that feeling that I felt so deeply to say, like, okay, I don't know all those answers actually. And yeah, to other people, this is going to seem like totally crazy, but I'm going to do it anyway. So, yeah, I did. And I'm so grateful for the journey.
I don't know how familiar you are with tarot, but that reminds me a lot of the Hierophant card, because the Hierophant card is a lot about peeling back the conditioning and learning to trust yourself. You step into your own self sovereignty, so you're less worried about what other people are telling you to do because you guys are just so different. You're trusting yourself now. So that's so cool that it's just like kind of aligned with that card, which is one of my favorite cards. Whenever it comes up, I'm like, ooh, I know you're going through some big changes. Let's talk about it.
I love it.
So for those listeners who don't know what human design is, are you able to try and sum it up? I know it's a big question, and we're actually listeners. We're going to be. She's going to take a look at my chart and kind of go over some of the things. So this is actually going to be on YouTube if you want to jump on and see the visuals, so you understand what she's talking about. But we are going to do that in a little bit, which will hopefully, if you look at your own chart, help you understand a little bit more on your own. But yeah, in general, how would you explain human design, and could you maybe go over the different, are they called strategies, like is that what it is, projector, I could be saying the wrong word, but could you go over the different types as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So, in a nutshell, human design is an energetic blueprint, and it is a combination of systems. So, it combines the traditional chakra system, the Chinese I Ching, the Kabbalah, Western astrology, and it takes those very spiritual systems and combines them with science, the science of quantum physics, quantum mechanics, and genetics. And so it's this, amalgamation of all of those things. You throw them all together, and like I said earlier, it's a synthesis of them. So out comes something, slightly different and super meaningful. So ultimately, it's a tool that you can use to help yourself, you know, ex- understand how you express yourself, understand how your energy is meant to work and be supported in the world, and then, ultimately live out your purpose. So I think that the power in it is really to take it beyond the learning. When you learn a little bit about yourself, then it's really about experimenting. And I do want to be 100% clear that human design is meant to be an experiment. It's never meant to disempower you. So if you are learning something about yourself and you find that it's holding you back from what your intuition is telling you, then I always say, the intuition is your default. That feeling of this is what I should be doing coming from inside, that's the pull that you really need to listen to, regardless of what your human design says. And so I think there's a little bit of confusion sometimes around that. So there are 5 different energy types, and that's often where people start. So sort of similar to like a sun sign in astrology. There are 5 different energy types. So briefly, there are manifestors. Manifestors are about 9% of the population, and they are here to kind of initiate, get things rolling, and are very connected to kind of source energy in terms of receiving something called an urge. So it's like this deep feeling that they just need to go this way, do this thing, start this path. So they are our initiators. Then we have projectors, which is your energy type, and they are about 20% of the population and are here to be our guides. While manifestors are here to like get things going, projectors are here to guide us. And one thing that makes a projector really quite special is that their aura is piercing, so that they can really see people at a different level. They can see them very deeply, and they tend to have a very interesting perspective of things. So that's projectors. And then we have generators, who are about 37% of the population. And generators are here like as the creatives, as the builders. So if manifestors get things going, projectors are here to guide generator energy, technically, from a mechanic standpoint, on the path that the manifestor has laid out for them. So the generators have like this juicy, kind of welcoming aura that is pretty magnetic, and gives them a lot of energy to like move things along. They are sacral beings, what we call sacral. So they have that sacral chakra is something called defined in their chart. And then we have manifesting generators. Manifesting generators are a combination type. They're the only hybrid type, but they're a little bit manifestor and a little bit generator. Technically, from a mechanics standpoint, they are a generator type. So they're about 33% of the population, also sacral beings, so creative. And what sets them apart from a generator type is that they tend to be multi passionate, multifaceted human beings and moving very quickly. If they're all about efficiency, versus generators are more like, let's get the momentum going, a little bit slower to start, and then, start cruising along, and more like a train. uh, so together, it's interesting to note this, together generators and manifesting generators make up about 70% of the population. So the other three energy types are very much living in a world built for generators, and without that sacral, which is like kind of like your battery, it's really important for those other three energy types to understand that influence from generator energy and pay close attention to their need for rest and rejuvenation. Generators and manifesting generators can just be really, really busy and lots of energy. And then the fifth type is reflectors, and reflectors are quite rare, only about 1% of the population. And when we take a look at your chart, what makes them unique is when you're looking at their chart, all of their centers, all of the shapes in the chart are white. So they have like no definition. And essentially, as a reflector, they are here to reflect the well being of kind of the population and really learn a lot about energy and taking in energy and filtering it and coming back to sort of who they are. So those are the 5 types.
Thank you. Thank you for going over that, because it's so funny. It's come up a few times in different podcasts, some that have been out and some that are to come. It's been touched on, but more like me and the other person talking about our own types. And so I'm so glad you went over each of them and what each of them mean. So listeners, you might even be sitting there thinking, oh, I sound like I could be this, or I sound like I could be that, which you might be, but you also might be surprised, because kind of like what you were saying, we live in a generator world. And so sometimes, me as a projector, I've always been leaning more towards the hustler type, because that's what the world kind of says to be successful. You got to go, go, go. And that's been a challenge for me, kind of learning like, I can't really do that, but I don't really know how not to. So yeah, it's super interesting to look into. And I'm also really happy that you explained to listen to your intuition and not like say that the human design is an end all be all, because it's not every system's going to resonate with everybody. And it's important to know what your own, what your own compass is saying on the inside. If it feels totally wrong, or there's certain aspects that don't quite fit, that's okay, right? So I'm really glad that you mentioned that. So from here, I guess, do you want to go ahead and start the screen sharing, and we can kind of
Yeah.
go there? Okay.
Yeah, let's do it. All right, this is great, Sarah. So let's just take a look at your chart, and I'll explain, kind of some of the basics. So we know that you're a projector, and there are a few different types of projectors. You are an emotional projector, which is definitely different than the other projector types, because the emotional solar plexus is a motor. So you probably have, a little bit more kind of energy than some of the other projector types may. And you've got two what's called completely open centers. So if you're looking at the chart here and you see the top two shapes at the very top of the chart, are the top one is the head, and the second triangle underneath that is called the ajna, or the mind. And those two are completely open. And what I mean by open is that none of the numbers within the triangles, the centers, are colored in. None of them are dark.
Yeah.
And so not having, what that means is you have some definition there. There are gates there that are defined. The numbers are called gates. So for you, you've got two completely open centers here with the head and the ajna. And those are all about, the head is the center for inspiration, and the mind, or the ajna, is the like our filter. So for you, you're like wide open. So that means like being able to look at many different perspectives and being probably pretty open minded, which is great. And then you've got a lot of action going in your throat center, which is the square beneath those two triangles. Quite a number of your gates are defined there. And, as a podcast host, I think that's you're finding a medium that's a really wonderful way to share your voice with people. So one of the things that I really like to talk about with projectors is the idea of waiting for an invitation. So every type has something called a strategy. And your strategy is essentially what you're here, how you're here to take action. And waiting for the invitation, how familiar are you with your strategy?
So I know of it, and I've known it since I've discovered human design maybe 3 years ago, but I still struggle with what that means. Had glimpses where all of a sudden I'll get people who will just really recognize me, and then opportunities will open up, but that doesn't happen. Like, it's happening more often than it did, but I'm still kind of like, well, I don't understand if I'm doing it right or if I'm understanding it right. It's a little confusing. So I would love to understand that more. Definitely.
Yeah, yeah. And it's such an important part of our human design is learning how to work your strategy. And honestly, it's the most important parts of your human design are your strategy and your authority. If you learned nothing else, if you practiced nothing else, your strategy and authority are always the thing to practice the most. So, and waiting for the invitation sounds like, well, what am I supposed to do? Like, what is the action there? And it's a fair question for projectors. And I like to encourage projectors to never again let themselves be held back by human design. So, if you want to go share something, then share it. However, it oftentimes projectors will see things that other people don't see, or they will have an understanding of something that other people don't understand. And it kind of goes back, like, we've all known friends of ours or people in our classes or in our surroundings who are like bossy pants, or who always think they know better, kind of thing. And that's sort of the misaligned projector kind of energy, is when they're going around telling people what they should be doing. And you know how it feels when somebody tells you you're doing something wrong, or there's a better way, but you thought you were doing fine, or you were really comfortable with the way that you were doing it. That can be really difficult to hear. And oftentimes, when projectors offer their advice, they can be met with a real resistance because the person isn't really available or ready to hear that information. So, this is what waiting for the invitation is all about. It's like, just you can even just ask. I love to encourage projectors to ask for invitations, because that's a great strategy to use your strategy. It's like, if you see something, let's say you have a friend who is in a situation, and you can see clearly what would be the best move for them. And you can ask, like, hey, do you mind if I share some thoughts with you? Or, you know what, I have an idea about what you might do. Would you be interested in hearing it? That gives them the opportunity to say yes or no. And it also gives them a moment to kind of adjust and open up a little bit to what, that projector energy is about to share, which I think is such a beautiful thing because, like I said, oftentimes projectors do see things in a very different way and clearly. They're not always right. You're, as a projector, you aren't always correct for everybody around you, but you do have a different way of seeing things. So the waiting for the invitation is a little bit about like asking for invitations when you really have something powerful and you really want to share it. And then the other thing that you said, which I loved, was that recognition piece. And that is super important for projectors. So I think a lot about, projectors who are entrepreneurs, who are using social media, for example. You don't have to wait for an invitation to put out a new podcast. This is your space. You don't have to wait for an invitation to post something on social media. So when it comes to like your own spaces and sort of creating them, it's like you almost look at people who are listening to your podcast. They are inviting in your energy, right? They are interested in what you have to say. People who are looking at your social media posts, they are inviting you in because they're curious about what you have to say. So invitations can definitely be unspoken. It gets pretty nuanced there, but you can learn to kind of discern, and I'm sure you're able to do this as an intuitive, that you can tell when there's that openness and when there's not. But essentially that's what you're looking for, is sort of that people being open to receive what you have to say. And if you sense sort of a blockage or like, I don't know if they're really ready to hear what I have to say, then that would be a cue for you to just say like, maybe I'll put a pin in this and come back to it, or maybe it's just maybe not the right timing, which especially for you as an emotional projector, timing is a very important aspect of your design, and like learning to wait, you know.
It's time to take a short break from our wonderful speaker. Are you in the need of guidance around love, career, family, life, or purpose? Embark on a spiritual journey inward with an intuitive tarot reading. Depending on what you're needing and looking for, I offer private one-on-one sessions as well as personalized email readings. It doesn't matter what the question is. A reading with me provides connection with your higher self, offering curated personal messages, or what I like to refer to as spiritual roadmaps, guiding you to the future outcome you desire. Readings are insightful and affordable. If you'd like more information or to schedule a reading with me, please see the link below.
If we can keep moving along, but let me just pause for a second and ask if you have any questions first.
No, I think you're explaining this all very well. And yeah, that does help me with the invitation a little bit. I definitely wanted to kind of just learn more as well, because that's something that I already kind of knew of, and I've already kind of like looked at different things. So the recognition piece is kind of how I've learned, like if someone really, and as an intuitive, and so anyone that's a projector, you probably know what this feels like. So I don't know if this will help anyone, but for me, what's kind of helped me is I can sense when people are, like you're saying, if they're open or if they're closed. And then I'm able to kind of, if I can sense that they're really not open to what I have to share, then I just kind of either I'll fumble forward and regret it and think, oh, this is not landing well, or I'll find a way to like back out of the conversation. But I've definitely, that does help me understand what that means, because I know exactly what you're talking about, that openness versus that closeness. And even in my readings, I think one of the reasons why they land so well most of the time is because I don't tell them what to do. It's an invitation. It's always and that's the verbiage that I use. It's funny, I used that before I even really knew about me being a projector, but it's always, this is the invitation that that's being offered to you. And that way they can pick and choose, like if it's, what they want to do with it. It's their call, but it's not like me saying, you have to do this, you have to do this. It's, no, this is what's being invited into you. And so what are you going to do with that? And, so I have learned how to, and probably just throughout my lifetime, learned how to use that to my advantage. So I'm not, making anyone feel uncomfortable, because that's like the last thing that I want to do anyway, is, push anyone. So, but thank you. Explaining that helps me understand what I'm looking for. And I know exactly what you're referring to. So it just cleared it up for me so much.
Oh, good. Oh, I'm so happy. I think one of the other things about your design in particular, Sarah, is you are a 2/4 profile, and that 2 line can be tricky sometimes. So there's that both 2 lines and 5 lines have something called a projection field. So it's similar energy to a projector, but it's different. A projection field is like, it's that idea of other people are going to see something in you that is really within them. They are going to project ideas onto you and maybe think that you can do something or offer them something that you can't or you don't, or it's really more just about them than it is about you. And so I can see, with your invitations, that recognition component of it is going to be really, really important, because you want to make sure that you're being recognized for what is true about you and not something that they think they see, within you. So do you feel, do you actually resonate with the recognition that they're giving you? Or are you hearing, a lovely compliment that, sounds great, and you're maybe kind of surprised, like, oh, I didn't realize that about myself. And it's a good time to sort of get curious, and wonder, like, is that really who I am? Or is that, my projection field at work here? Responding to those types of invitations can get you into muddy water. So it's important to kind of differentiate, like, okay, am I being recognized for my actual gifts? Then I can respond to the invitation. Then I can, like, move ahead. Or am I being recognized for something that they think I can do? And if I move forward on that invitation, then it might not turn out the way I had hoped. Does that resonate?
That really resonates. I'm shocked right now, because yeah, there are many times where people will like say things and kind of like, and it's not that, I mean, on one hand, there are times I get compliments where I'm like, oh my God, that's so true. I don't see that in me. And then I have to sit with that, because it's a really cool moment of, I do that, but then there are actually several times. So this happens probably more often than the other one, where people will throw compliments on me or tell me, oh, you're this or you're that. And I'm like, no, I'm not. And it's not that I'm putting myself down. It's that I don't want to do what you're saying that I would be good at. That just doesn't feel like me. And, I've had people push me, like my sister's a singer songwriter, and I could sing too, and I enjoy singing, but I have no desire to pursue it as a profession. And I remember people being like, oh yeah, you should go with her, and you should do this and you should do that. And I don't want to. That's not where my desires are. But or they'll compliment me and compliment like certain aspects of myself that I know. Yeah, it's exactly what you're saying. And there have been times where I've been caught up in thinking like, oh my gosh, this is an opportunity, and then it just kind of falls flat, and I'm kind of left confused. Well, they said this, but it didn't land, and with myself. And so with you saying that also will help me kind of discern it moving forward, because there are times where I'll get compliments like that where it doesn't feel, not that it doesn't feel genuine, it just doesn't feel right to me. But then there are times where I just feel that recognition. I just feel so seen and valued, and it's like, okay, they get it. They're open to what I have to say. And then there's times where I get the kind of like the fluff, but it doesn't go any farther than that. And I never really understood why that is. And now I do. So thank you.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. I love those examples. And, There's another sort of layer to the two line that is all about basically being a natural at something, like having something come really easily to you, that it's almost like blinking or breathing. You really don't think about it. You maybe aren't that aware of it, or you make the assumption that everybody can do it because everybody can blink or breathe, right? Why can't everybody, listen to their intuition, or whatever it is that really is innate within you. So there, I think that adds yet another layer of nuance to your design, is just understanding, like, are the people who are coming into my world really recognizing what I have to offer? Are they, and then if something doesn't resonate when they say, hey, I see you can do that. You could also ask yourself, like, is this something that I do naturally, that I didn't even really think about, or that comes so easily to me, that I didn't really think about. And those can also be, fun places to look if you are, in business or an entrepreneur or whatever. They're great places to like dig in a little bit to see, like, what do you have to offer the world that you think is just so second nature, but people would actually really enjoy and appreciate, hearing from you and how you do it. So
Yeah.
that's just another layer there. I would love to talk about your authority, which is that emotional solar plexus. And so the emotional solar plexus is, if you're looking at your chart, to the right, it's that triangle facing in toward the sacral, down toward the bottom.
The one that's colored in?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So it's called defined. That center is defined. And when you have this center defined, you will always be an emotional authority. So this is called an emotional authority. And 50% of the population has an emotional authority. So it's interesting because, if there's a key word for emotional authority, it's time. It's basically just wait it out. So if you are making a decision, you are looking to ride your emotional wave and just sort of feel the highs and the lows of, your excitement, and ultimately come to a decision that feels right to you. Really, in the end, it should be like, how does this feel? Oftentimes people can't really describe it, they just sort of like feel like, okay, it just feels good, so that's the way I'm going to go. It can take a little practice with the emotional authority, because first of all, our world very much awards or rewards the quick decisions. It's like being able to think quickly on your feet and being able to decide with a lot of like confidence that exactly in the moment, right, what is true and good for you. And emotional authorities, that's just not the way it is, and that's half the population. So I always joke like how different marriages might be if emotional authorities were actually given the time, versus in the moment of like the proposal, to say like, that sounds great. Can I get back to you tomorrow? So that's actually really what you should be saying when you're making a decision. Even when you're super excited about it and you get this rush of excitement, and it sounds really good, just learn to communicate that. Say like, that sounds amazing. That sounds so fun. And just let me get back to you. So I'll let you know tomorrow. I'm just going to sleep on it. And basically what you're looking for is more information to come into your awareness. Like, let's say a friend asks you on a Monday if you want to, go out for dinner on Friday. And you might be really excited, like, oh my gosh, let's do it. We haven't seen each other in so long. Let's put it on the calendar. So just say, I'm so excited about that. I'm going to put a pin in it and I'll get back to you tomorrow. And then, in the next 24 hours, just sort of look for signs. Like maybe you see a billboard for the restaurant where you want to go, or maybe you know, hear something on the radio that is like a song that the two of you really loved, or you know, maybe you get an email that mentions something about the plans that you made, or you know, something that you did years and years ago together. Or you know, maybe you realize that, oh shoot, I had something planned for that night and I completely forgot about it, you know. So it's just really about looking for those clues, kind of those breadcrumbs that the universe will send to you to let you know, like, yes, this is great. This is good. Go this way. And if you're not getting that, then, you know, rethinking, like, maybe this isn't going to work out. So it's, yeah, really giving yourself as much time as possible. And, you know, sometimes like there are decisions you make every single day, right? On a dime. And what I like to encourage people to do is, you know, let's say you're out at a restaurant with a group of people. Try to go last, or, you know, maybe half of you are emotional authorities. So, you know, the ones who can make the decision in the moment go first, and then you take your time, you know, and you're listening to people order, and then you're thinking, oh, maybe that would be good, or, you know, so just giving yourself as much time as possible to really like think through, and not even think, but like feel through your decisions. How does that resonate?
That one is probably the one that I struggle with the most because I'm like impatient in nature. So the idea of like not answering right away, on one hand, I think there's this anxiety of like FOMO, of like fear of missing out. If I don't respond immediately, it'll be gone and then I'll be left without. So then there's some lack mentality in there, and there's some feelings of like that impatience of like I should just know, or you know what I mean? But I don't know how much of that is societal, you know what I mean? So when you've mentioned that a lot of this is deconditioning, and I do know that when I take the time, like there are times where like if I have a big decision to make and it's something like life altering, you know, like if it's a relationship status or it's a job status or something like that, I do tend to ride the wave. It's funny because like I won't realize I'm doing it. So I have done that before where like, you know, I might start on one thing like, okay, this thing really bothers me. I need to make a decision. I feel, and then I'm already thinking about the decision I'm going to make, and I'm going through all the feelings. And then by the end of it, it's like I processed what I needed to process, and I realized I don't have to make that big decision that I thought I did, because I just had some feelings I needed to process first. And then I came to the end of it and I was like, oh, no, I'm okay. It's not as big or as bad as I thought it was, or you know what I mean? So I can see how I do that with some of the bigger things without, you know, but I don't do it all the time. And I do have the tendency, like if someone gives me an opportunity or invites me to something, I'm more often than not going to answer them right away.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Which could be a little bit of your root, you know, so the root center, which is at the very bottom of the chart, it's that square at the bottom. The root center is a pressure center. And essentially it's pushing pressure up into the rest of the chart, into the emotional solar plexus. In your case here, you've got this channel that connects the two and defines both of those centers. And so it's pushing on those emotions to like feel through, feel. And I think, you know, the idea of FOMO is a really great question for emotional authorities. You know, if I say no, then, you know, is this opportunity ever going to come around again, or whatever? And I think that this is where really trusting in the universe that whatever is meant for you will never miss you is so important. You know, if you miss out on an opportunity, it's either making space for something better and more aligned for you, or it just means that it's coming around again and that it will be at, you know, a more aligned time in the future. So always remembering that when you know, you feel that disappointment of not, you know, not being able to participate in XYZ. It's like, you know, and I would just encourage you to experiment with it, you know, just see with some of the things that feel maybe not super important, experiment with those first and see like, what would happen if I just like waited on this one? And, you know, if it's really meant for me, like it'll come together.
I love how you mentioned the trusting the universe piece, because it's something that I already teach. It's like, if it doesn't happen, it's because it wasn't supposed to, and it's making space for something better, which is such a hard concept. There's a huge element of surrender to it too, of like, I'm going to trust that it's going to work out. And that's really hard, I think, especially in today's world where we want to see to believe. And it's like the reverse. You have to believe it to see it, which is hard, because what if, in your mind you're like, what if I'm wrong? But so yeah, I'm really glad that you mentioned that, because that's definitely something that I personally believe, but it's harder to fully trust in it, even though like you have to trust it in order for it to follow through. So I really like that you explain that. So as much as I would love to keep doing this, because I'm so fascinated by everything you're sharing, and I'm sure our listeners are they may even be following with their charts, which, by the way, I'm probably a little late saying this, but maybe I can go back and insert this later. But if you're listening to this, like, feel free to maybe pull up your own chart and kind of follow along, and kind of see if there's any similarities that you can pick up from, and learn about while we're looking at this. So from here, I'd love to just shift to what I like to call synchronicity story time. So, especially in your work, I don't know if you get synchronicity specifically in your work or just in general, where the universe lets you know, hey, you're right where you're supposed to be, or gives you like a little wink here and there. Like, do you have a story like that you could share?
I think I'll look back on my departure from teaching as kind of a good example there, because there were so many sort of odd things happening around my departure, and it almost felt like I had I had these different glasses on, and I was seeing a completely different world than a lot of the people around me, and their interpretations of what was happening. Now, I'm a 5/1 emotional generator, and same with you with that projection field. The 5 line has a projection field, and I can see in retrospect where that was very much in play. There were a number of things that were happening that just sort of I was like, where is this coming from? Like, what is happening here, really? And I just had to, like, trust, and feel like, okay, I am just gonna keep walking this path, and it seems to be taking me out of this work that when I started teaching that year, I did not think it would be my last year. And so I just had to continue to, trust and show up and be like, oh, if I'm supposed to come back and do like consulting or something like that, then things will come together. And it just never did. And toward the very end of the school year, I got together with some of my close colleagues at the time, and the woman who was at the time the acting principal. And I brought a deck with me, a deck of cards. And they're like, I used the Rebel deck. I don't know if you're familiar with her deck. It's sort of this tongue-in-cheek, like, kind of sassy deck. And it's a good, I think, introduction to using cards, because it's funny and sassy. And so anyway, we were we were doing readings, and I did, a card spread, and it was basically, the whole message was about, like, it's time to fly, it's time to go. And I couldn't, if I had laid out the cards and hand picked them, I couldn't have laid out a better, right, spread. And if I had to be hit on the head with it, this was it. So I feel like that was a really kind of cherry on top of the sundae of all of the other things that were happening at the time. So
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I know there's Oracle and Angel cards, which I love those too. For me, they don't speak to me the same way. For me, tarot is like a conversation, and I just love how specific it gets. It gets so, like, to the T, and that's what I love about it. So it just sounds like it really, like you said, it hit it on the head for you. Like, this is what you need to do, and we're gonna get really crystal clear. We've been sending you signs, but let's really get clear for you. And so, do you feel like you found your purpose in the work that you do?
yes. And I definitely talk a lot about purpose in the work that I do. And I feel like a lot of times people think that it's something that they should be doing, or this thing that they have to find. And I think my belief is that your purpose is really that shedding of expectations and just being your authentic self. So when you are being your authentic self, then you just naturally are doing what that authentic self will do. And so that kind of work can look, a million different ways depending on the million different people out there. So, if you're questioning whether you are on purpose or following your purpose, then you probably are not. And that's your nudge to be like, where am I out of alignment? Where am I like not following that inner calling, to be who I really am? So, yeah.
That's so funny. You just answered my next question, which
Okay.
was if everyone has a purpose. So you kind of like answered both at the same time. I love that answer because it is like once you're able to find yourself, and that's really about deconditioning and going inward and healing and all of that. That's where you find. So I'm actually going to be shifting my verbiage because the last interview I did made me realize, like, you know what? I don't think it's purpose. It's mission. It's your mission statement. So I think purpose
Mm.
kind of makes it seem like you're saying it's a thing you have to do. Whereas when it's a mission statement, it's more like who you are. It's more like, yes, there's a doing to it, but it's more just coming from your authenticity, like you're saying. Like when you're living in your authenticity, you're already going to be doing what lights you up, which is just going to come naturally to you. And then by doing that, that's where you're already going to be doing something for the world just by being yourself. And so yeah, I think I'm gonna shift my verbiage from purpose to mission here soon.
I just want to point something out because I think that word for you in particular is like spot on, because if going back to your chart, if you look at your sun and your earth are in gates 38 and 39, and those gates are all about there's sort of this energy of like knowing what to fight for, and sort of like this activism, like this real passionate kind of, just mission, led kind of feeling. And so I love that word for you because there is there is sort of this flavor, this sense with the word mission of, a calling, like a work that you have to do type of thing. And it's so fitting.
And I just think that purpose, like to your point, and to several other interviewers I've interviewed so far, who point out the same thing, it does tend to feel like you have to. It's something that you do, and then people think it's like this, and sometimes they think they have to be super successful and reach these big heights, and it's not about that. Like for me, I know I'm living my mission when I do a reading for someone, when I could see how it lands, how it resonates, and I could see the wheels turning and they're able to connect the dots. That is what lights me up. And it's not a big thing. I'm not going out and doing this in front of the world and cameras and all of that. It's just that one-on-one, I could see it made a difference. And that's
Mm.
it. And so you could do that in a number of ways. You can help someone who dropped a bunch of papers, and oh, let me help you with that. Or, there's just so many ways you can live your mission without it being this big thing like purpose can sometimes sound like.
So true. So true. It's like in the little moments, right?
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, oh my gosh, Lori, this was such a great conversation. I really enjoyed learning about my chart and learning more about human design. And I hope our listeners learned a lot as well. But if they want to work with you directly and get their own charts read, how can they find you?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, first of all, for taking the time. This is great. And yeah, my name is Lori Lisai, and you can get your chart on my website, which is lorilisai.com. And Lisai is spelled Lisai, like Lisa with an I at the end. And yeah, get your chart. I have a couple of freebies that will help you, discern what all of those lines and shapes and numbers mean, and teach you about specifically your type strategy and authority, which is really, as I mentioned earlier, the place to start and really start to learn about yourself. And so I do readings as well. I do sessions where we kind of just like what we just did with your chart, break it down. And I like to ask people usually before a session, where are they stuck? Like what's going on? Because oftentimes people will book sessions right when they're struggling with something. So that's good to know beforehand so I can try to shed some light and help you understand where in your chart you can get unstuck. And then I also have a group coaching program called Own Your Magic, which is all about basically, making the next decade of your life the most authentic and aligned decade that you can possibly have. So through, learning and deconditioning. So yeah, I'm also on all the socials at Lori Lisai.
Perfect. That is amazing. So I will make sure to put all that in the show notes so listeners can find you easy and quickly. And yeah, again, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you for joining me on another inspiring episode. Remember, your purpose is a unique and unfolding path. I hope these conversations have ignited a spark within you. Until next time, keep exploring, growing, and embracing the beautiful adventure of connecting with your purpose. Stay tuned for more meaningful conversations. If you're wanting more, consider joining our free Facebook community called Spirit Journey Collective, your haven for spiritual exploration and personal growth. Dive into a supportive community where sharing spiritual experiences is encouraged. Unlock the power of intuition, embark on a journey of self-discovery, and connect with like-minded souls. If this sounds like a community you'd love to plug into, the link is in the show notes below. If you enjoyed the episode today, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And thank you for joining me on this journey.